Fairfax, Delegate Simon.
Mr. Speaker, I rise for a point of personal privilege.
The delegate has the floor.
Mr. Speaker, members of the House, yesterday we heard a fairly pointed parliamentary inquiry from the delegate for Albemarle about emergency clauses and the rules requirements for emergency clauses. And he mentioned the possibility that there had been a speaker's ruling on this issue in recent times. And then, of course, Mr. Speaker, you held up a copy of the rules themselves. I think we meant to say the rules, not the rulings. But it got me thinking that maybe there had been some rulings from speakers in the past on the issue of what the vote requirement is to adopt an emergency clause on anything brought down by the governor. So while everybody else, I think, was celebrating the end of crossover or sleeping in late this morning from celebrating the end of crossover, I paid a trip to the Journal and Records office up on the 4th floor to do some research. And it turns out that in 2010, on the first day of session, the then speaker, in fact, made remarks and had them entered into the journal, which are really surprisingly on point. What the speaker said at the time was, if I can get to the right page. Yeah, I thought using the book would be a better prop, but it's actually a little bit harder to follow. Here we go. Let me just go ahead and use the printout from the book because I have that right here. So, Mr. Speaker, what it said is, the speaker at that time said that over the summer he'd been reviewing legislation. I'm going to put my glasses on now, too. Jeez, I'm getting old. But trust me, the good part's coming. Mr. Speaker, what the speaker at the time says that over the summer he'd been reviewing the legislative process issue that's been giving him a lot of heartburn, which is whether a governor's recommended amendment that otherwise would constitutionally require a voting margin greater than a simple majority of members present for passage, and then parentheses, such as an emergency clause under Article 4, Section 13, could constitutionally pass with just a simple majority vote. So it sounds like we're right on topic. And he goes on to say, first and foremost, the issue stems from the following sentence in subdivision B of Section 3 of Section 6 of the Constitution of Virginia, which says each house may agree to governor's amendments by a majority vote. He goes on to point out, though, that this sentence does not, and this is all caps and underlined in the journal, and I've got copies for anybody who wants to see it, this sentence does not override any of the supermajority requirements in other areas of the Constitution. In his review of the issue, he had found no authority to show that it was ever the intent of the General Assembly to grant the executive branch such substantial power to override several long-standing supermajority requirements in the Virginia Constitution. He goes on to say it seems to him that if that was the intent, that would have said so in the Constitution when the amendment was added. B, they would have been discussed during deliberations of the General Assembly, which it was not. And C, that he would have been it would have been included in the explanation to voters, which it was not. Second, he said the sentence in Section 6 governs matters of a general nature. That is, the governor's recommended amendment could concern any subject matter, whereas the supermajority provisions in the Constitution govern matters of a specific nature. And I think the delegate from Albemarle, as longtime chair of courts, can tell you, he probably agrees with this next sentence, which is that it is a well-established rule of statutory, or in this case, constitutional construction, that when two or more provisions govern similar matters, that a specific provision prevails within its domain over a more general provision. Therefore, it is his opinion, this person who wrote this opinion, that a governor's recommended amendment to a bill that he returns to the General Assembly pursuant to Section 6 of Article 5 of the Constitution is subject to any applicable special voting margin requirements in the Constitution. That is underlined and italicized. And that 2010 written opinion entered into the journal, which lastly, in order to accurately reflect and document my rationale, I am asking the journal clerk to include my remarks in today's journal. That was Speaker William Howell of Stafford County that made that written decision. There have been no written decisions or opinions or rulings, nor could I find any oral decisions or rulings, no parliamentary inquiries from anyone on this matter in the years since this 2010 decision was issued. Now, I know some of you guys are going to say, but the rules, right? Rule 75 in 2018 and 19, it had specific language that talked about the fact that the governor's amendments had to get the language of the underlying bill, and that language seems to have gone away in 2020 and 21, and you did that, so that's the new rule. Well, I will tell you that Rule 75 matches Rule 75 that was in place in 2010. That's what my paperclip was going to. Rule 75 in 2010 read, a Senate amendment to a House bill to be concurred in or a conference report to be adopted must receive the same recorded vote as required to pass the bill itself. That's the same language Speaker Howell was interpreting in 2010. That's the same language that appears in the 2022 rules. It's the same language that appeared in the 2020 and 2021 rules. It is different than what was in the 2018 and 19 rules. So we had some surplus language that went away, but that doesn't change anything. And Mr. Speaker, members of the House, I think we all know pretty basic stuff. The Constitution controls over our rules. We can't change vote totals that are required by the Constitution by anything that we do in these rules, right? So, Mr. Speaker, members of the House, I think we're probably going to have a conversation about this later. I know it's not proper when we have a parliamentary inquiry to go back and forth with the chair. So I wasn't sure, given the conversation that we had yesterday, given the parliamentary inquiry they heard and the response that we got, I wasn't sure that everybody in the House and the chamber was aware of this ruling, so I wanted to make sure I brought it to the fore so that everybody knew what it was that's happening. If, for some reason, we adopt the amendments on the supplemental calendar this afternoon, we will be overriding the very well-reasoned, thoughtful precedent Republican Speaker Bill Howell articulated and had printed in the Journal in 2010. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I thank you, members of the House.